senior producer from NFL Films and also one of the key contributors of the ESPN NFL Matchup show on ESPN every weekend. It is Greg Cosell joining us. And Greg, first, how you doing? Looks like it's a casual Friday for you as it is for us.
Well, I had to be in my monkey suit earlier when we taped the matchup show, but I figured I knew you guys weren't formal, so I took off my coat and tie and figured I'd go casual, if that's okay. I know nice. Tasker doesn't mind.
Yeah,
not at all.
No, we appreciate you not making us look bad.
The Adidas sweatsuit is right in my wheelhouse. I appreciate it.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, the Bills have got this game against the Patriots, a different one for Bills fans than we were just talking about. We got a whole generation of people that don't know what it is to be favored against the Patriots or think you're supposed to beat them. What's wrong with them this year? What's their biggest issue? Or maybe if there's more than one, what are the biggest ones?
Well, I think they're really struggling offensively, and that's normally we don't think about the Patriots as a team that struggles offensively. We always would think of the Patriots if they had a bad offensive game, they'd put up 20 or 24. Now they are really struggling to move the ball. Certainly Cam Newton has not played particularly well. I think he spoke a lot this week, and he'd be the first to admit that. As you know, Steve, it's an accountability business. It's all on tape. You can't say everything's great when it's not, because it's all there for everybody to see. I think when you look at Cam over these last number of weeks, he's not seeing things with the necessary clarity, so he's leaving throws on the field. What that means is he's not turning it loose to open receivers within the context of the play call and the route concepts. And he's also missing throws with poor accuracy. So he's been struggling in that area. He seems to me, watching tape, to be playing very deliberately, as if it's just not happening at the necessary speed. There's a very fine line, obviously, when you play quarterback between playing with the necessary speed and tempo and playing too fast. But he just looks very, very deliberate to me when I watch him.
Now, one thing that they have done pretty well is run the ball, at least in the earlier stages of the season. But then you look at their personnel groupings, Greg, and they're doing it in much different fashion than they used to. And maybe that's a byproduct of the fact that they don't feel like they have too many tight ends they feel like they can count on as compared to years past, because they're almost running exclusively 11 and 10 personnel so far this season. No two tight end sets really to speak of on any of their game tape. So how is it they are being successful in the run game? Is it mostly read option and stuff like that, horizontal stuff? What are we looking at?
Well, certainly Newton's has been a major factor in the rushing yardage. That's the area in which he's probably done best. And it makes perfect sense if you're Josh McDaniels to incorporate and integrate the design run game dimensions into your offense, no question. I really thought actually last week, Damian Harris, I thought he ran extremely well. And he's a back I very much liked coming out of Alabama. And he's obviously getting an opportunity now with Sony Michel, I believe, still on IR. Mm-hmm. So I think that, again, I don't know how Josh McDaniels is going to think. It sounds like the weather is not going to be conducive to tossing the ball around the yard on Sunday in Buffalo. So I would expect Damian Harris to get some meaningful carries. I would also expect to see a lot of multiple run game dimensions. Not only Harris, but with Newton, I'd expect to see Burkhead in the game doing a number of things. I'd expect to see, jet sweep with Damiere Byrd, who's got speed. I would expect to see them things to try to jumpstart the offense just to gain yards, because right now they are struggling to really sustain any kind of offense.
Do you anticipate a likely tactic by the Bills is to pack the box, dare them to throw it, that kind of thing, even though go zero coverage, and just particularly with Edelman out and N'Keal Harry being questionable with a concussion, those two guys off the top of the receiver list, you might think you can go zero coverage and win all day.
Yeah, I don't think Leslie and Sean are going to go zero as a foundation. They could do it on some snaps here and there, depending on down and distance, field location, things of that nature. But I certainly would expect them to they're certainly going to play single high. I would, a good part of the time, whether Poyer predominantly tends to be in the box more so than Hyde, but they do interchange. So I would definitely expect that to be the case. We'll see. Look, the Patriots, we know that Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels are expansive thinkers. So what we've seen while they've been struggling isn't necessarily what we're going to see Sunday. I would expect to see some different things tactically. Whether they're successful, we can't answer that. But I don't think that Bill Belichick's just going to line up and do the same thing, given that they have really struggled offensively.
What did you make of the Bills' blitz concepts that they deployed last week against the Jets? I mean, they got defensive backs involved in their blitz packages. And, I mean, at the end of the game, you got 3 or 4 defensive backs that factored in on sacks. I know that the Jets were playing, tighter splits, and that kind of helped guys get around the edge a little bit better. But what were your thoughts on the Bills' blitz packages last week?
Well, it's also the opponent. I mean, you definitely want to blitz that O-line. You definitely want to blitz Darnold, who tends to be frenetic and play fast. So as a function of the opponent, they have a blitz scheme, which a lot of teams have, and the Bills do it extremely well, where they line up Milano and Edmonds in the A gaps, and how offenses will pass protect against that, and then they bring the slot corner. In this case, it was Johnson. Sometimes they would bring a boundary corner, Tre'Davious White. They did that earlier this season, I believe. But they bring someone off the edge because in that particular concept with 2 in the A gaps that the center and the back are responsible for those 2, and there's not going to be anyone who's going to account for the blitzer off the edge. So that's one of their favorite blitz tactics. And even though Johnson did not get credit for that sack, I believe that was Hughes getting credit for that sack. It might even have been the fumble that the Jets recovered. But I know Marlowe had a sack, but that was actually what we call a green dog, Chris. They were playing man coverage versus a 2 tight end set, and both tight ends stayed in and blocked. So Marlowe then added into the pressure. So he got, I think, half a sack on that, but that was not a pure blitz by Marlowe.
As we talk about the other side of the football, the Bills' offense, and this is something that's really interesting to me. Now, the conditions, the weather conditions are going to have something to say about this, but this seems to be, particularly with Stephon Gilmore having a knee issue and may be out of the game, the Bills' wide receiver core really seems to be a positive matchup for the Bills. And if that's the case, what do the Patriots, how do they counter with that? Do they go coverage and invite the Bills to drop everything underneath? They keep the lid on the defense? Or do they defend the pass at the front end and try and get after Josh Allen? They'll probably do both, obviously. But this Bills team goes pretty deep at wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the conditions. Look, we know Josh can throw it through anything, but again, it is a function of the conditions. If it's pouring rain, it is hard to throw the ball a lot. If it's just, let's say, a drizzle but windy, then maybe you can throw it a bit because Josh has an arm that can cut through probably anything. My sense is the Patriots have shown that against quarterbacks that can run, and there were more design runs this week. They've played Russell Wilson. They've played Patrick Mahomes. In those games, they played far more zone coverage than we're used to seeing from the Patriots. So I would expect them to play more zone and basically say, you know what, you're going to need to go 11, 12 plays and score touchdowns. Because obviously there were red zone issues this week. They were 0 for 5 in the red zone. The Jets did a pretty good job of keeping things underneath, forcing Josh to keep it underneath. Josh did miss what should have been a touchdown to Cole Beasley at about 3 minutes of the second quarter. Only he could tell you why he didn't throw that, but he did miss that. But other than that, and other than the throw to Kroft, which was actually a great read and great throw by Josh versus disguised cover 2, he made a great throw. He read it. Other than that, they really did not have any kind of intermediate or vertical passing game. So I would think the Patriots would say, you know what, you're going to need to go 11, 12, 13 plays to score. I'm curious to see, guys, and you're there, I'm not, if Zach Moss is more involved as a so-called number 1 back in this game, because I think he's got that sustaining, competitive, urgent element to his running, and this might be a game where 4 or 5 yards is a good gain.
Yeah. Right. I wanted to get your thoughts on the running game in a little bit different way, because we saw what the 49ers were able to do last week in kind of crossing up that front seven for the Patriots. They got their eyes in the wrong place an awful lot. It didn't look like they adjust very well to the 49ers pre-snap motion.
Yep.
Can you break that down for us in terms of what you felt the Patriots failed to do consistently there in giving up as many rushing yards as they did?
Well, I'll answer it this way, Chris. keep in mind that that's foundational to the 49ers.
Right.
The 49ers didn't go into that game and say, you know what, we're going to do something different against the Patriots. What's foundational to the 49ers is a ton of motion. In fact, I know they led the league in number of snaps with motion a year ago. I don't have that number in front of me for this year, but I'm sure they're in the top 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And also the runs that are for other teams might be viewed as a little bit outside the box are not outside the box for the Niners. You know, the jet sweeps, the orbit reverses, all those things, the use of Samuel, you know, on those kinds of runs where they toss it to him. Those things are sort of part and parcel of what the Niners do. They're not what the Bills do. Now, having said that, when you see a team struggle with motion, and struggling with motion is a number of things. It's number one, how do you deal with it, whether you're in man or zone? And number two, you hit it right on the head. It grabs the eyes of second-level defenders. And you want to see how the Patriots react to that. Because in the NFL, it just takes one beat or one bad step, as you guys know, and that's the problem. So I would absolutely count on them using some motion in this game. They're normally not a heavy motion team, as you know, but I think that you have to test that with the Patriots this week.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be one of those games, and I get back to what you said about Zach Moss. Yeah, his productivity and this coaching staff with Sean McDermott and company, when a player starts to play well, he gets more opportunities. And Zach Moss certainly, I would agree with you. Zach Moss's production certainly deserves more
snaps.
Popped
a couple of runs last week.
And I think you probably will see him more on the field.
And I think he fits, you know, given what this game is likely to be weather-wise. He's a sustaining back. He's a sustaining grinder. And in this game, you know, like I said, you know, 4 or 5 yards is a big deal in a game where you're probably not going to get a lot of big plays in the passing game unless something, you know, changes with the weather. But, you know, he was a third-round pick. He wasn't a throwaway pick. Zach Moss was a really productive college back. He's got a very defined style of running. You know, the reason he's a third-round pick is because he's not explosive and would not be viewed as special, but he is a hard-nosed, competitive, determined, urgent downhill runner. And I think this game kind of demands that.
Well, I'm guessing that Steelers-Ravens was on your guys' radar for the matchup show this week. Maybe I'm wrong, but
we missed that. Chris, we missed that game. Are they playing?
I mean,
this week?
It's billed as the biggest rivalry in the league, and you understand why. I mean, those teams go at it tooth and nail every single year, it seems. The interesting thing is how much the Ravens' passing game has struggled.
Yes, and that was basically the main focus of our section on that game, because we've been spending a lot of time the last number of weeks talking about the Steelers, and the Ravens were coming off a bye, so we really focused on just what you said.
So what did you pull out of that?
Thrown for over 200 yards in 4 consecutive games.
Yeah.
And teams have really tactically done specific things within their own concepts to take away their passing game. Teams have really loaded the box, squeezed everything inside. Keep in mind that the Ravens foundationally are built on Lamar Jackson as a runner, not as a ball distributor. So teams are taking away him throwing the ball inside because everything works off the run game, and they're basically daring that offense and Lamar to throw it outside the numbers. And I think at some point they're going to have to do that to really take that next step.
Yeah, and the problem there, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because that was the Bills' approach with the Ravens last year in a December matchup up here in Buffalo. They dared Lamar Jackson to throw outside the numbers, and he struggled with that. Now, the Ravens still won the game, but it was a tight game for almost start to finish. And, I mean, the Ravens won 24-17, but they took a similar approach there, saying, all right, Lamar, let me see if you can throw it, you know, from the far hash outside the numbers, and he had trouble doing it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Bengals were such a good example. They're a 4-3 team, obviously like the Bills. But what the Bengals did is they basically played a 4-3 stack, Chris, and they had their 2 safeties literally like 3 yards behind the stacked linebackers. I mean, they were basically saying, you're not going to work the middle of the field. Number one, we're going to take away the run because we literally have 9 guys who are going to defend the run. And we also have 2 safeties who we don't really care about them as pass defenders. You're going to have to, as pass defenders, as far as, you know, they're so close to the line of scrimmage. Right. So they basically said to the Ravens, you're going to have to throw it outside. Now, obviously, the Ravens won that game handily for many other reasons, but teams within their own particular concepts are taking away all these throws to the tight end in the middle of the field. They're basically saying, we're going to stop your run. You got to throw it outside. They're going to have to do that at some point.
And they signed Des Bryant this last week to see if they could get that done. Is that how? I mean,
he's on the practice squad right now.
I have no idea where he is in his career right now. So I can't. So Steve, I can't speak to what he is. But I mean, obviously, they know they need something on the perimeter in the pass game.
They need size, right?
Yeah, it seems a little bit desperate to me to get somebody out on the outside, and I think that speaks volumes about where they think they are. Also, what else is going on in the AFC East? Tua Tagovailoa is going to get the start in Miami against the Rams. Tell us about what you expect with the Miami Dolphins. Forget about the quarterback. The Rams are headed into Miami. What about this game?
Well, needless to say, Tua has been the topic of a lot of conversation this week, and all I can do is tell you what I saw when I watched him in college. And, I think that he's a very rhythmic player. I think he's got really quick feet on his drop and set. The ball comes out with great timing. He's accurate in the short to intermediate area. Does throw a pretty nice deep ball as well, but he's a rhythm player. He's not, to me, he's not Russell Wilson. To me, if he's to reach his ceiling, and I actually found out that Nick Saban feels the same way, so I felt pretty good about that because I think he probably knows a little more football than I do. But I think to reach his ceiling, he'd have to be a player like Drew Brees. That's the way he would have to play. Be very rhythmic, great sense of timing, great feel for the position. Not that he's immobile. It's not that he's a statue. And Drew Brees wasn't either. Drew Brees was actually a very good athlete when he was younger. But I think for the most part, Tua will be a timing rhythm thrower.
And then the last one for me is the Seahawks-Niners matchup. We know the Seahawks are having a ton of trouble stopping anybody these days, and they've tried to add to their defensive ranks to improve that, with the trade this week, getting Dunlap from the Bengals. But where do you feel the problems lie there? I mean, they've got an all-pro and Bobby Wagner at the second level. I know Jamal Adams has been hurt, but, man, people are just blowing by those guys every single week, it seems.
Well, I'll tell you this, and again, everything I talk about has to do with tape study. I don't think Bobby Wagner's played as well this year. Not that he's a bad player, but I don't think he's played at the level we come to expect from Bobby Wagner. Okay. So, they can't rush the quarterback. Their secondary, I know that Shaquille Griffin, I guess, may not go this week. We don't know that yet. I think it's concussion protocol. So any secondary will struggle if you can't rush the quarterback. At some point, the secondary will struggle. And right now, they cannot rush the quarterback at all. And Dunlap's not going this week. So we'll see. But the Niners are not a throw ball team unless the game demands it. They don't go into a game saying, hey, Jimmy G, we want you to drop back 40 times. No matter who's playing running back, and it's probably going to be Hasty, they're going to run the football and work off of that.
As you go down the standings around the National Football League, one team that's kind of flying under the radar is the 4-2 Indianapolis Colts. They got off to a kind of a bumpy start, but Phillip Rivers has kind of found his rhythm. Eberflus, the defensive coordinator for Frank Reich, has started to come around, and they've started to play a little bit better. They're playing Detroit this week. How do you see that interconference game going?
I'm going to answer it this way. I think the most overlooked, really, really good quarterback in this league is Matthew Stafford. And I know he's only been in one playoff game and he didn't win it. But when you watch his tape, and I've been doing this for years, I think he's close to being a special player. Now, he's on a team that hasn't been able to run the ball. Their defense is bad. But I'm really curious to see how this plays out in Detroit because the Colts have a good defense, clearly. But it's a pretty defined defense. They rush 4. They play more cover 2 than any team in the league. They play cover 1. Those are their 2 predominant coverages. You know what you're going to get. The Lions have some pretty good weapons on the outside. So I'm really anxious to see this game from the standpoint of Detroit's offense versus the Colts defense.
All right, Greg, as always, we thank you for breaking it down for us. We appreciate it. Enjoy the games this weekend.
All right, guys, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
All
Greg.
right, Greg Cosell from NFL Films and also from ESPN's NFL Matchup show, which you can watch every weekend on Saturday and Sunday mornings on ESPN2 and on ESPN.